Dead America, Tales from New York, Car 37, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1, Day 0, 2:33 a.m. Officer Brooks, a trim man in his 30s, ran his fingers through his dark hair as he peered into the mirror of the Brooklyn Bodega's cramped bathroom. It was his fourth consecutive overnight shift, and the strain was evident on his face. For the past 4 years, he had stuck to the day shift routine, but with a baby on the way, the allure of extra income and the opportunity to be present for his wife's prenatal appointments persuaded him to switch. Yet, as he confronted his reflection, the toll of his decision weighed heavily on him. The sound of banging on the bathroom door interrupted his contemplation. "Hey Brooks, did you fall in?" came the voice of Officer Sanders. "I'm coming out," Brooks replied, splashing a bit more water on his face before drying off and exiting the bathroom. His partner, Officer Sanders, greeted him with a grin, offering a jumbo-sized cup of coffee. "Just the way you like it. 2 sugars, 4 creams, and a shot of whiskey," Sanders said cheerfully. Brooks chuckled, accepting the coffee. "I prefer bourbon, but I suppose beggars can't be choosers." Brooks took a sip of the coffee, immediately detecting the absence of any trace of alcohol. Sanders gave him a playful wink, prompting Brooks to let out a resigned sigh. "I know you mean well, Sanders, but I'm running on about 15 hours of sleep this entire week. If you promise me alcohol, and there's none in my coffee, I might just have to plead insanity after I kneecap you." "And there wouldn't be a jury in the city that would convict me," Brooks quipped, a hint of exhaustion evident in his voice. Sanders burst into laughter, drawing the attention of the man behind the counter, who let out a low whistle, signaling for them to come over. Approaching the counter, they watched as the man lifted a large paper bag, already showing signs of grease stains. "I may not have alcohol for you, but I've got the next best thing." "Come on," Sanders said, gesturing for Brooks to follow. The cashier handed over the bag with a smile, and Sanders eagerly opened it, revealing the tantalizing aroma of freshly cooked meat and spices. "Did you get the extra cheese?" Sanders inquired eagerly. "What kind of grill would I be running if I didn't put extra cheese on it?" The cashier replied with a grin. Turning to Brooks, who was struggling to maintain focus amidst his fatigue, Sanders grinned. "And for my friend here? I took care of him too." "No charge tonight," the cashier insisted. "I don't mind paying," Brooks interjected. Please, it's my gift to you. Officer Sanders has been a regular here for years, and if you're going to be sticking around the night shift, I want to make sure you're a regular too." As the undesirables say, the first one is always free, the cashier explained warmly. "And believe me, you're going to be hooked," Sanders added with a smirk. "Thank you. It smells wonderful, and I look forward to debasing myself in the car as I eat," Brooks replied with a weary grin. The cashier's grin widened as the 2 officers' radios crackled to life. "Car 37. What's your 20? Came the voice of the dispatcher. "Hey dispatch, car 37 here. We are walking out of the bodega at Ocean and 5th, Sanders responded. "Fantastic. We have a domestic just a few blocks away from you. I sent the info to your screen," the dispatcher relayed. Sanders couldn't help but drop his head in a defeated manner, casting a longing glance at the bag of hot food that would undoubtedly be cold by the time they reached their destination. "Copy that dispatch. We're on the way," Sanders replied, holding up the bag to the clerk in silent gratitude as the 2 officers hurried off to their car. They climbed in and quickly activated the lights and siren, executing a U-turn in the middle of the road to head in the right direction. As Sanders drove, Brooks focused on the screen. "What do we have, Brooks?" Sanders inquired. "Looks like a standard domestic." Neighbor heard yelling through the wall, then furniture crashing down, Brooks reported. Sanders' tone dripped with sarcasm. "These are always so much fun. 2 more blocks up on the right. Then it's up to the 4th floor," Brooks directed. "This better not be a walk-up," Sanders muttered under his breath. Sanders skillfully maneuvered the car to a stop in front of the mid-rise building, swiftly grabbing the radio before stepping out. Car 37 on site, Sanders announced into the radio. Copy that. Proceed with caution. The same neighbor just called back, saying the noise got louder a moment ago. The dispatcher relayed. Of course it did. Thanks, dispatch, Sanders replied with a hint of resignation. The two officers entered the building, breathing a sigh of relief when they spotted the elevator. Thank God it's too early in the morning to be hiking upstairs, Sanders remarked, pressing the button and waiting for the elevator car to arrive. When the doors slid open, they found a young couple inside, the woman struggling to support her barely conscious boyfriend. Sanders swiftly reached out, steadying the couple before they tumbled over. Hey now, are you all right? Sanders inquired with concern. My boyfriend, he's really sick and needs help, the woman explained, her voice fraught with worry. The officers assessed the boyfriend's condition, noting his pale complexion and dazed expression. Come on, let's sit him down, Brooks suggested, guiding the couple to a nearby couch in the lobby. With their assistance, the boyfriend slumped onto the seat, clearly in distress. If he's this bad, why haven't you called for an ambulance? Sanders questioned. I tried several times, but they're all tied up. At least that's what the operator said, the woman replied, frustration evident in her voice. It happens. Let me see what I can do, Sanders assured her. Sanders swiftly grabbed his radio and activated it. Dispatch, it's car 37. We need an ambulance at the address you just sent us to. One adult male, mid-20s, in some form of major distress, barely responsive, Sanders relayed urgently. I'll see what I can do, 37, but the whole city is going crazy tonight, the dispatcher responded, a note of frustration evident in their voice. Thanks, dispatch. They're in the lobby, so they'll be easy to find, Sanders acknowledged. Copy that, came the dispatcher's curt reply. Sanders turned his attention back to the young woman, who sat anxiously beside her ailing partner, trying to rouse him. Help should be on the way. Just stay here and do your best to make sure he's comfortable, Sanders reassured her, offering a comforting smile. Meanwhile, Brooks retrieved a pillow from a nearby recliner and brought it over to the couple. Help will be here soon, Brooks added, his voice filled with reassurance. The woman nodded gratefully as the officers headed towards the elevator. Stepping inside, they ascended towards the 4th floor, the soothing strains of relaxing music playing in stark contrast to the tension unfolding below. How are all the ambulances spoken for? I thought the night shift wouldn't be that busy, Brooks queried, his brow furrowed in confusion. Some nights are like that, especially around closing time for the bars. You'll get used to it, Sanders replied with a resigned shrug. The elevator dinged as it reached the 4th floor, and the officers stepped out into the corridor, immediately greeted by the cacophony emanating from the nearby apartment. The sound of furniture being flung about and items shattering put both officers on high alert, prompting them to draw their weapons as a precautionary measure. Approaching the source of the disturbance, they heard a neighbor's door swing open, the resident cowering behind it as the officers aimed their guns in his direction. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. The neighbor pleaded frantically. Get back into your apartment now, Sanders commanded sternly, his tone brooking no argument. But you hear what I'm talking about, right? The neighbor persisted. Yes, we do. Now get back into your apartment, Sanders reiterated, his patience wearing thin. With a glare, he watched as the neighbor obeyed, quickly retreating and shutting the door behind him. The officers exchanged a glance, silently expressing their exasperation at the man's recklessness. Approaching the apartment door, Sanders banged on it forcefully, his voice booming as he called out. Police, open the door. A moment later, a loud thud reverberated against the door, followed by the unsettling sound of scratching on the wood. Both officers tensed, their senses on high alert as they remained poised, weapons at the ready. Their attention shifted to the doorknob, which jiggled as if someone on the other side was attempting to open it but couldn't. Sanders immediately shifted into combat mode, raising his voice to address the person inside, believing them to be in distress. "You need to stand back from the door. We're coming through to help," he declared assertively. Sanders hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward with determination, delivering a forceful kick to the door. The impact was enough to snap the door away from the frame, splintering the wood. However, the door abruptly stopped shortly after opening, as if it had struck something behind it. Moments later, a bloodied woman clad in a bathrobe flung the door open, her vacant eyes and numerous wounds painting a terrifying picture. With a chilling moan, she charged straight at Brooks. Before either man could issue a command, she lunged at him, sinking her teeth into his forearm as he raised it to defend himself. Brooks let out a scream of pain as Sanders swiftly intervened, wrapping his arms around the woman's waist and forcefully slamming her to the ground. "You just messed up, bitch. You're under arrest for assaulting an officer," Sanders declared firmly, his voice tinged with anger. As the woman thrashed about, Sanders applied pressure with his knee, eliciting sickening sounds of bones cracking. After securing her arms behind her back and restraining her with handcuffs, he cautiously got up, keeping a close watch on her erratic movements. "My God, lady, what kind of drugs did you take tonight?" Sanders questioned incredulously, observing her convulsions on the ground. Standing over her, Sanders ensured she couldn't get back up with her arms restrained behind her. His tone shifted from disbelief to concern as he remarked, "Man, that must be some good stuff if you can't even get to your feet." Meanwhile, Brooks held up his bloody arm, revealing a sizable chunk of flesh missing from his forearm. Sanders' expression morphed from assertive to worried in an instant. "Jesus Christ, Brooks, let me get a look at that," Sanders exclaimed, his concern for his partner evident in his voice. Sanders inspected the wound, noting its depth and the profuse flow of blood. "Come on, the least this bitch can do is spare a towel for you," Sanders remarked, his tone a mix of frustration and concern. He walked to the door, weapon drawn, and stood in the doorway, issuing a clear command. "Police, we are entering the premises. Come out to the living room and sit down on the couch, hands in the air." There was no response from inside the apartment. Sanders motioned for Brooks to follow as they cautiously entered. The apartment had a cozy layout with a moderately sized kitchen and living room area. Doors on either side of the room led to different areas of the apartment. The bathroom door on their left was wide open, while straight ahead was a balcony door that allowed a gentle breeze to drift in. The closed bedroom door to the right remained silent, offering no clues as to what lay beyond. Sanders spotted a towel hanging in the bathroom and motioned for Brooks to retrieve it. Meanwhile, as Brooks applied pressure to his wound with the towel, he heard Sanders approach the closed bedroom door cautiously, unsure of what awaited them. Opening the medicine cabinet in search of something to treat the bite, Brooks heard his partner's voice suddenly cut through the silence. "Stop right there," Sanders shouted, followed by the unmistakable sound of a gunshot ringing out. Chapter 2. Officer Sanders approached the bedroom door with caution, his grip firm on his handgun, prepared for any threat that may lie beyond. With a tense exhale, he pushed the door open, revealing a scene straight from a nightmare. The bedroom was a vision of destruction. The mirror shattered, a bedpost snapped in half, and blood staining every surface. At the far end of the room stood a man, his gaze fixed on something outside the window, seemingly oblivious to the carnage around him. As the door creaked open further, the man turned, revealing bloodstains on his shirt and around his mouth. His eyes widened with a feral intensity as he let out a piercing screech, charging towards Sanders with alarming speed. "Stop right there," Sanders commanded, attempting to raise his handgun, but the creature closed in before he could take aim. With reflexes honed by adrenaline, he fired a shot, hitting the creature in the gut, but it seemed unaffected, its momentum undeterred. The impact of the creature colliding with Sanders sent them both crashing backward, the coffee table shattering beneath them with a sickening crunch. "Brooks," Sanders called out desperately. Officer Brooks released the towel from his grip and dashed toward his partner's aid. Sanders lay sprawled on his back, pierced by splinters of wood and glass, with the creature atop him ferociously attempting to inflict harm. With a surge of determination, Sanders lifted his arm, seizing the assailant's shirt at its midpoint, forcibly pushing it away and guarding against its biting attempts. The zombie thrashed its arms in a frenzy, striving to break free from his grasp. As the creature gained ground in the struggle, edging dangerously close to Sanders's exposed flesh, Brooks hastened over, seizing the creature by its shirt collar and wrenching it backward with all his might. With a mighty exertion of force, the zombie toppled backward, crashing heavily onto the ground. Drawing his handgun, Brooks took a step back, fixing his gaze upon the now standing zombie, its attention squarely fixed on him. Positioned before the open patio doors, he raised his weapon, issuing a stern warning. "Stay right there. Do not move or I will fire," Brooks commanded, noting the curious absence of pain in the man's gut wound. Before he could fully process this anomaly, the creature surged toward him. Rather than discharge his weapon, Brooks retreated another step, nearing the patio railing, bracing himself for impact. As the ghoul closed in within a yard's distance, Brooks lowered his shoulder, allowing the creature to grasp at empty air. With a swift and decisive motion, Brooks flipped the zombie over his shoulder, sending it hurtling toward the pavement below. He pivoted quickly, witnessing its descent as it crashed headlong onto the ground, the sickening snap of its neck echoing up to the 4th floor. Returning his attention to Sanders, who was rising from the ground, Brooks was met with concern. "Are you okay, Brooks?" Sanders inquired. "Well, I didn't get bitten again, so I'd call that a win. Are you all right?" Brooks replied. "Yeah, too close for comfort, though," Sanders admitted, his voice laced with relief. Sanders rose to his feet and made his way to the patio, peering down at the gruesome scene below. "That's some solid work, though. Should be fun paperwork, too," he remarked wryly. Brooks glanced at his injured arm before suggesting, "Do you want to call it in? I need to get back to my arm." "Yeah, I got you, buddy," Sanders assured him, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, do you copy? Car 37, Sanders radioed, his breath still heavy with exertion as he awaited a response. "There you are, 37. You need to get down to Barry's bar right away. Shots fired and a riot is breaking out," came the dispatcher's urgent reply. "Jesus, dispatch, we kind of have a situation brewing here. We have shots fired on that domestic, one drugged-out bitch in cuffs, and her drugged-out man on the pavement 4 stories below us," Sanders informed, frustration evident in his voice. The dispatcher's tone shifted abruptly, taking on an authoritative edge, indicating that she was dealing with something major. "It can wait, 37. Secure the prisoner in their dwelling and get down to that bar," she directed firmly. Concern etched in his voice, Sanders inquired, "Is everything okay there, dispatch?" "No, 37, it is not. Now get down there now," came the terse response, devoid of further explanation. "Jesus, dispatch, what are you walking us into?" Sanders voiced his apprehension. "I wish I knew, 37, but in the last half hour, shit has gone crazy across the city. I have more reports of violence than I have officers to send out, so we're in triage mode over here. Biggest problems first," the dispatcher explained, a hint of strain evident in her tone. "Copy that. So I'm guessing that ambulance isn't coming?" Sanders queried, recognizing the gravity of the situation. "Maybe before lunch. Tell whoever needs it to stay in their apartment," the dispatcher responded, her voice wavering slightly despite her efforts to maintain composure in the face of escalating chaos. Sanders understood the urgency and refrained from pressing further. "Copy that, dispatch. We're on the way," Sanders acknowledged, releasing the radio as Brooks re-entered the room. "What's the deal?" Brooks inquired, visibly perplexed. "We're to head out to some bar down the street," Sanders relayed, shaking his head in disbelief as he tried to make sense of the unfolding situation. "You shot somebody and I dropped a guy off a 4th-story balcony. And we're just walking away?" Brooks questioned incredulously. "Yeah, something is going down in the city tonight. We have bigger issues to deal with," Sanders responded somberly. Both officers peered into the hallway, their attention drawn to the woman still prone on the ground, thrashing and moaning. There's no way in hell I'm riding in the same car as her. Or else there's going to be 2 shootings for us tonight, and that's way more paperwork than I care to deal with, Brooks asserted firmly. Relax, we're just going to drag her ass in here and come back later, Sanders reassured, seeking to diffuse the tension. I can work with that, Brooks conceded, nodding in agreement. Exiting into the hallway, each officer took hold of one of the woman's arms, ensuring they remained a safe distance from her snapping jaws as they maneuvered her into the apartment. Despite their efforts, she continued to resist, attempting to sink her teeth into their legs. Once inside the apartment, Sanders struggled to maintain his grip, and the woman's violent thrashing caused her to crash to the ground, narrowly missing Brooks's leg as he jumped back in alarm. Damn dude, I'm sorry. She just ripped out of my grip, Sanders apologized, concern etched on his face. I'm all right, but if it's all the same to you, I say we call her good, Brooks replied. As they looked down at the woman's sprawled face first in the kitchen, still writhing, Sanders concurred, Yep, I'm good. Let's roll out. Exiting the apartment and shutting the door behind them, the officers made their way toward the elevator, only to be greeted by a nosy neighbor peeking out of their door. Are you okay, officers? I heard a gunshot, the neighbor inquired, concern evident in their voice. Everything is fine. Just stay in your apartment until you see another police officer, do you understand? Sanders instructed firmly, his tone brooking no argument. The cacophony of the woman's thrashing and moaning reverberated down the hallway, audible enough to catch the attention of those nearby. Is she okay? The concerned neighbor inquired. Officer Sanders, with a grim expression, replied, She's under arrest for attacking my partner. Brooks, lifting his arm to reveal a hastily bandaged wound, elicited a disgusted reaction from the neighbor. So no matter what you hear, do not open your door. Understand? Officer Sanders instructed firmly. Yes, officer, the neighbor affirmed hastily, promptly shutting the door and securing it tightly as the 2 officers made their way towards the elevator. Standing before the polished metal doors, they were enveloped in an uneasy silence, their reflections staring back at them. Upon the elevator's arrival, they entered and pressed the button for the ground floor, patiently awaiting its descent. With a sigh of relief as the doors closed, they began to unwind. I know it's only my first week on night shift, but is it always this insane? Brooks questioned, breaking the silence. This is a banner evening to be sure, but I've had some that ranked pretty high on the list. Like this one time when I got called to what was reported as a domestic, but turned out to be a bunch of swingers who. Before Officer Sanders could continue his story, the elevator abruptly halted on the 2nd floor. As the doors slid open, a young woman barreled inside, colliding with Sanders with such force that she stumbled backward from the impact. The officers had no time to react before 3 ghastly figures rushed into the confined space. 2 of them immediately seized the woman, sinking their teeth into her flesh, one on her arm and the other on the side of her neck. Reacting swiftly, Brooks assumed a defensive stance, thrusting his arms forward and forcefully repelling one of the creatures, causing it to tumble to the floor. In the frenzy, the girl was propelled forward by the biting assailants, pinning Sanders against the wall. Limbs flailed wildly as chaos erupted, blood spraying in every direction, rendering Sanders immobilized while Brooks swiftly drew his handgun. Despite the cramped quarters, he took aim and fired at point-blank range, the gunshot ringing out as a round pierced one of the zombie's skull, dropping it lifeless to the floor. This momentary distraction allowed Sanders to push off the back wall, shoving the woman and the remaining zombie out of the elevator, where they collided with the first zombie, sprawling onto the ground below. As the woman collapsed, the 2 zombies, consumed by their ravenous hunger, paid no heed to the officers, tearing into her flesh with abandon. Brooks and Sanders stood in grim silence, drenched in blood, the echoes of the gunshot still reverberating in their ears. They exchanged a wordless glance, grappling with the harrowing scene before them, before the elevator doors mercifully sealed shut. Hey Sanders, Brooks finally spoke up. Yeah, Brooks? Sanders replied wearily. Can we go back to breaking up swingers' parties? Brooks suggested wryly. Sanders managed a faint chuckle amidst the horror. Yeah, I think I'd like that. In a daze, the two men stood in shock, wiping blood from their faces as the elevator signaled their arrival at the ground floor with a sharp ding. The sound acted as a catalyst, snapping them back to attention. Instinctively, they raised their guns, poised for whatever awaited them beyond the threshold. As the doors parted, they breathed a collective sigh of relief at the absence of immediate danger, cautiously inching out while scanning their surroundings. Their eyes darted towards where the young couple had been earlier, only to find them conspicuously absent. Brooks tapped Sanders on the arm, directing his attention to the empty spot, prompting both to train their weapons in that direction. Drawing closer, they detected murmurs, the source of which remained ambiguous. Upon reaching the couch, they were met with a gruesome sight. A pair of legs protruded from behind it, with a man atop a woman. Initially oblivious to their presence, the creature focused solely on its macabre feast, tearing into the woman's throat. Brooks, with determination etched on his face, cocked the hammer of his gun, seizing the attention of the ghoul. The creature turned, bloodied flesh still dangling from its jaws, emitting a guttural moan before Brooks pulled the trigger, a bullet piercing its skull. With a thud, the beast collapsed onto the woman, who clung to life by a thread as blood seeped from her grievous wound. Eager to render aid, Brooks moved forward, but Sanders intervened, firmly grasping his arm and urging him towards the door. "We got to get out of here, Brooks," Sanders urged, his voice tinged with urgency. Despite his inner turmoil, Brooks acquiesced without protest, falling into step beside his partner as they made their way out to the street. Without hesitation, they climbed into their car, the urgency palpable as Sanders wasted no time in slamming his foot on the accelerator before Brooks could even fully shut the door. They sped off, the world outside a blur as they put distance between themselves and the nightmare they had just left behind. After a couple of blocks, Sanders pulled over, and they sat in tense silence, processing the harrowing events they had just experienced. "What in the hell is going on, Sanders? What do we do?" Brooks demanded, his voice laced with desperation. Sanders glanced at the screen displaying the address of the bar dispatched to them by the dispatcher. "We do the only thing we can do," Sanders replied grimly. "We keep moving." Pointing to the address on the screen, he met Brooks' gaze, nodding as they embarked on their next call. Chapter 3. The two officers cruised down the street, grappling with the unfolding events of the night. Their reverie shattered as they rounded the corner onto the next block. "Holy Mother of God," Officer Brooks exclaimed. Chaos greeted them as they made the turn. A car ablaze, crumpled against a streetlight, a figure engulfed in flames staggering from its open door before collapsing. Meanwhile, near the bar, a full-scale brawl erupted, casting the street into turmoil. As they observed, several figures bolted from the bar, pursued by sinister creatures. Without hesitation, Sanders floored the gas, accelerating swiftly. At the opportune moment, he veered sharply left, narrowly avoiding the fleeing civilians but striking the pursuing zombies head-on. The creatures thudded onto the hood with force, Sanders then jamming the brakes, sending them hurtling backward into a wall. Both officers leaped from the car, guns drawn, ready to engage if the zombies stirred. To their relief, the creatures remained motionless, blood flowing from the backs of their heads. Sanders directed his attention to the fleeing civilians, shouting, "Get back to your homes and do not open the door for anybody." Two of the bystanders bolted, but a young woman stepped forward, tears brimming in her eyes, her voice shaky. "Please, there are people trapped in the freezer," she implored. "We'll do our best," Officer Brooks assured her. "Please, one of them is my sister. She's..." The girl's voice faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "She was my responsibility. Please save her." "I'll take care of it." "What's her name?" Brooks inquired. "Barbara," the girl replied. "Okay, I'll get her out safe. Now you need to get someplace safe," Brooks instructed. With nods from her friends, they whisked her away down the street, disappearing into the darkness. The officers turned their attention back to the bar. "It's not good to make promises you can't keep," Brooks, Sanders remarked. With the way the night is going, we're going to be lucky to see the sun come up. So if breaking a promise is the worst thing that happens, so be it, Brooks replied grimly. How do you want to play it? Sanders asked. We give one verbal warning to everybody. Then after that, if someone is being attacked, their attacker gets a shot to the head, Brooks decided. Yeah, those headshots seem to work a lot better than the gut shot, Sanders agreed. Let's clear it out, Brooks concluded. The two officers advanced swiftly toward the bar, their voices raised in urgent command as they drew nearer. Police. Officer Sanders bellowed. Everybody stop fighting now. Aggressors will be shot on sight. This is your only warning. Despite the authoritative warning, the chaos persisted unabated. Both officers exchanged a knowing glance before hastening over to the patio area. In one corner, two women sought refuge behind an overturned table, fending off a trio of assailants. With precision, the officers aimed their weapons and unleashed a volley of gunfire. A bullet found its mark, felling one of the creatures with a fatal shot to the head, while another struck a zombie in the shoulder, redirecting its focus toward the officers. The creature, a formidable figure clad in tattered remnants of a suit, charged recklessly, crashing through furniture in its path before stumbling and falling before the officers. Without hesitation, both officers took aim and dispatched the fallen foe with well-placed shots to the head. The commotion drew the attention of the lone remaining zombie on the patio, which swiftly disregarded the girls in favor of the officers. With swift reflexes, both men opened fire, their shots finding their mark and felling the undead assailant. Inside the bar, amidst the ongoing brawl, the additional gunfire failed to divert the attention of the combatants toward the officers. Sanders and Brooks swiftly converged at the edge of the patio, with Sanders providing cover while Brooks attended to the shaken girls. You're okay, Officer Brooks reassured them. The girls' screams pierced the air as Officer Brooks swiftly moved the table aside, his soothing voice a counterbalance to the chaos. You really need to go right now. Get home and lock the door. Don't open it for anybody, he urged them firmly. Gradually, the girls began to regain their composure, finally heeding his instructions as they rose and fled down the street. Meanwhile, Officer Sanders discharged a couple of rounds toward the restaurant. As Brooks glanced back, his gaze fell upon 5 advancing figures converging on Sanders. With a sense of urgency, Sanders retreated a few paces, continuing to fire as the horde closed in. Brooks raised his weapon and took aim, his shots finding their marks with lethal accuracy. One creature crumpled to the ground, but despite Sanders' relentless barrage, the remaining zombies overwhelmed him in the street, tearing into his flesh. Brooks's cry of anguish filled the air as he witnessed the gruesome spectacle. 3 zombies viciously tore at Sanders, their gnashing jaws rending flesh from bone. With a heavy heart, Brooks opened fire, his aim precise as he sought to eliminate the assailants without harming his partner. Another creature fell under the barrage, but as Brooks swiftly reloaded, one of the zombies rose to its feet, intent on reaching him. Sidestepping deftly, Brooks evaded the creature's charge, delivering a fatal shot as it rushed past him. Rushing to Sanders' side, Brooks seized the ghoul by its shirt, pulling it forcefully to the ground before delivering a final, decisive shot to its forehead. Then, turning his attention back to his fallen comrade, he spoke in a tone laced with desperation. Oh my God, hang on, Sanders. Hang on, we're going to get you some help. Brooks's hands trembled as he reached for his radio, his voice shaking with urgency as he relayed the dire situation. Officer down, officer down. We're in the street right outside of Barry's bar, he urgently broadcasted, straining to hear any response, but receiving none. Growing increasingly desperate, Brooks repeated his distress call, his words laced with frustration. Officer down, damn it. I need backup and an ambulance right now. Still met with silence, Brooks's heart sank as he gazed down at Sanders, his life slipping away in a pool of crimson beneath him. In a cruel moment, the light faded from Sanders' eyes, leaving him motionless upon the unforgiving pavement. A guttural scream escaped Brooks's lips as he rose from his fallen comrade, grief and anguish washing over him. Yet, before he could fully process the loss, cries for help pierced the chaos from the bar's entrance. Suppressing his own pain, Brooks sprang into action, pivoting to confront the imminent threat. His command sliced through the tumult as he shouted to a young man fleeing from the bar. "Get down." The young man complied, diving for cover behind a nearby overturned table on the patio. Seizing the opportunity, Brooks unleashed a barrage of gunfire, swiftly dispatching the pursuing zombies with deadly precision. Approaching the shaken young man, Brooks offered a steadying hand as the survivor struggled to his feet. "You're okay now, but you need to get to safety." His words trailed off as the young man's panicked cries interrupted him. "Look out," the young man exclaimed, pointing frantically behind Brooks. Brooks spun around, his heart racing as he caught sight of the zombified Sanders lurching back to his feet, hurtling towards him with alarming speed. Initially frozen in shock, Brooks struggled against the paralysis gripping him, managing to break free just in time to evade Sanders' advancing menace. With a swift sidestep, Brooks thrust his shoulder into Sanders, sending him sprawling to the ground. Disoriented, Sanders struggled to regain his footing, his eyes locking with Brooks in a moment of tense uncertainty. Emotions churned within Brooks as he grappled with how to proceed. Before he could react, a desperate cry pierced the air as another survivor struggled to fend off the approaching horror. Brooks snapped into action, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun as he took aim at Sanders. With a single shot, he struck Sanders in the shoulder, causing him to stagger momentarily. "I'm not done with you yet, partner." As Sanders emitted another bone-chilling moan, his undead form hurtled toward Brooks. Instead of resorting to his firearm, Brooks held his ground, waiting for the opportune moment. As Sanders closed in, Brooks sidestepped, causing him to stumble and fall. Seizing the advantage, Brooks swiftly pinned his knee into Sanders' back, restraining him despite his frantic struggles. With a heavy heart, he uttered, "I'm sorry, Sanders. Truly I am, but this is the only way." Pressing the barrel of his gun against Sanders' temple, Brooks hesitated, grappling with his conscience. With a steady hand, he finally pulled the trigger, the gunshot reverberating through the desolate streets as Sanders slumped lifelessly to the ground. Collecting himself, Brooks checked the ammunition in his handgun before heading straight for the nearby bar, where signs of movement still persisted. A young man gazed at him in admiration, grateful for his timely intervention. "Officer, you shouldn't go in there. Those things are everywhere," the young man cautioned. "It doesn't matter. I'm already dead," Brooks responded, lifting his arm to reveal the telltale bite mark. "It seems these creatures' bites are death sentences," he remarked. Brooks gestured towards his fallen partner before speaking solemnly, his voice tinged with resignation. "As soon as he was bitten, he got back up and turned into that," Brooks explained, indicating the transformed Sanders. The young man's eyes widened in disbelief. "So what are you going to do? Just run in there and kill yourself?" he asked incredulously. Brooks met the young man's gaze with determination. "There are some people in the freezer who need help. I'm going to get them out." "You're crazy," the young man exclaimed, shaken by Brooks' resolve. "I'm also a dead man walking," Brooks replied stoically. "Now go on, get out of here. This isn't the only place this is happening." With a nod, the young man fled down the street, leaving Brooks to steel himself for the task ahead. He glanced once more at the chaos unfolding inside the bar, then swapped out his half-empty magazine for a fresh one, pausing to grab his radio. "Dispatch, I don't know if you're still listening, but this is Brooks from Car 37. He spoke into the device, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "My partner, Sanders, is gone, taken out by whatever these things are. He was bitten and turned. I had to put him down with a shot to the head. It seems to be the only way to put these things down for good. Spread the word to the others out in the field. This is my final sign-off. Good luck." With a decisive motion, Brooks tore the radio from his shoulder and cast it aside. He took a steadying breath, bracing himself for what lay ahead as he stepped towards the bar. Okay, let's finish this. Chapter 4. Officer Brooks strode up to the bar with purpose, a sense of liberation filling him as he embraced the certainty that his time was limited, regardless of the outcome awaiting him. Pushing the door open, he entered swiftly, his gun drawn and aimed at a target, a creature grappling with the bartender, its gnashing teeth inches from her flesh. Without hesitation, Brooks fired, the shot finding its mark and freeing the bartender from the creature's grasp. With a swift leap over the bar, she fled to safety. Before him lay a scene of madness. A dozen figures, some human, some not, locked in violent struggles. Brooks surveyed the fray, noting the telltale bite marks on several unfortunate souls. Recognizing their doomed fate, he pressed forward, deaf to their pleas, focusing solely on those he could still rescue. Approaching the rear of the bar, he spotted a young man holding a zombie at bay with a chair. The creature thrashed wildly, but the determined youth refused to yield. Brooks took aim and dispatched the threat with a single shot, granting the man reprieve from his perilous task. Recognizing the bar uniform, Brooks seized the man. "Where's the freezer?" he demanded. On the way out the back, the young man replied, his eyes darting towards the exit. "Show me," Brooks commanded. But the man balked, fear evident in his eyes. "No way, man. I'm getting the hell out of here." "Is there a back door?" Brooks pressed. "Yeah," the man confirmed. "Then you can get out that way." "Come on," Brooks commanded. Brooks tightened his grip on the young man and propelled him towards the back door, urgency driving their movements as they navigated through the congested hallway of the bar. Half a dozen creatures blocked their path, their futile attempts to breach the freezer evident in their frantic motions. "Get behind me," Brooks commanded, positioning himself in front as the young man complied, wielding a chair for protection and watching their rear. With steady aim, Brooks raised his handgun, methodically picking off the zombies with each precise shot. The echoing blast reverberated through the hallway as skulls exploded under the impact of his bullets. When the initial trio fell, the remaining creatures diverted their attention towards Brooks, closing in with heightened aggression. Transitioning seamlessly from deliberate shots to rapid fire, Brooks maintained his focus, aiming for headshots to incapacitate the approaching threats. The lead creature stumbled, its demise causing a chain reaction that momentarily halted the others. Seizing the opportunity, Brooks lunged forward, firing several shots into the standing ones and using his boot to pin down the fallen zombie. But as he aimed at the last remaining threat, it lunged too close for comfort, sinking its teeth into Brooks' outstretched hand, tearing flesh from bone. Pain erupted, but Brooks acted swiftly, dispatching the assailant with a bullet to the forehead before it could finish its grisly meal. With grim determination, he turned his attention to the remaining creature, still pinned underneath his boot, swiftly dispatching it with a well-placed shot. As the immediate danger subsided, the young man's voice pierced the chaos. "Officer," he called out, his tone fraught with urgency. Brooks spun around as the sound of approaching footsteps reverberated through the back hallway. Several creatures charged towards them, their relentless advance threatening to overwhelm the young man with the chair. The young man braced himself, positioning the chair strategically to impede the first zombie's progress. Brooks dashed to his side, joining the fray and unleashing a barrage of bullets into the oncoming horde. "Get to the freezer," Brooks commanded, urgency lacing his tone as he assessed the escalating situation. As Brooks glanced back into the bar, the ongoing struggle between remaining creatures and patrons continued unabated, the gunfire failing to deter their ferocious combat. Determination etched on his features. Brooks retraced his steps to the freezer, where the young man was frantically pounding on the door, calling out to those trapped inside. With a moment's effort, the door unlatched, revealing a group of terrified individuals huddled within. 2 workers and 4 patrons, their fear palpable in the cold air. "There's no easy way to say this, but is anybody bitten?" Brooks inquired, his voice grave. A young woman among them raised her hand, indicating a bandaged bicep. "Here," she confessed, her gaze haunted. "Okay, everybody else out, wait by the back door for me," Brooks instructed firmly, though met with hesitant protests from some. Grimly, Brooks displayed his own bite marks, silencing the objections. I know what these things do, and I'm not doing it for my self-preservation, I'm doing it for yours. Now move, he yelled. As the group filed out, the bitten woman's sobs filled the air. Brooks stood stoically, his own emotions churning beneath the surface, yet he maintained a facade of composure. Both of us are going to be like those things out there. It's only a matter of time. I'm sorry, but there's no way around it, Brooks confessed somberly, his words laden with regret. The woman struggled to contain her tears, her anguish evident as she grappled with the grim reality unfolding before her. Now I'm going to get these people to safety, but I can't take you with us. Do you understand? Brooks questioned gently, seeking her acceptance of the dire choice ahead. With a soft nod, the woman acknowledged her predicament, her acceptance tinged with resignation. Okay, so you have two choices. I can lock you in here so that you're not a danger to anybody else. Or I can end it for you right now, Brooks explained, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. The sight of the handgun in Brooks' hand sent the woman into a frenzy of panic, her cries escalating as the cold air intensified her trembling. Brooks recognized her fragile state, realizing she teetered on the brink of collapse. I'm sorry, I really am, Brooks murmured, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. With a final act of mercy, he raised his weapon, the woman turning away as he pulled the trigger, releasing her from her torment. Exiting the freezer, Brooks faced the remaining survivors, their shock and fear palpable as they regarded him warily. Relax. I'm here to help you. Now, which one of you is Barbara? Brooks inquired. One young woman, her hand trembling, timidly raised it in response to Brooks' inquiry, her fear evident in her demeanor. I just want you to know that your sister is safe. She got out of the bar and went off with a couple of people, Brooks reassured Barbara, the news bringing a measure of relief to her anxious expression. Barbara nodded gratefully, her gratitude evident in her eyes as she absorbed the information. Now, does anybody live around here? Brooks queried, scanning the group for a response. A man raised his hand, offering 2 blocks away. We're going to your place then, Brooks decided. I have a 1-bedroom apartment. There's no way that I can fit this many people in. The man began, but Brooks interrupted him with a stern gaze, his handgun once again visible. We'll figure it out. The man relented under Brooks' unwavering stare. That's the correct answer. Now come on, I don't know how much time we have, Brooks urged, taking the lead as the group followed him out the back door. Navigating through the alleyway, Brooks relied on the man's directions, leading the group towards safety. Along the way, Barbara voiced her confusion and concern. Officer, do you know what's going on? 1 second we're having drinks, and the next second it's a war, she queried, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I wish I knew what to tell you, Barbara. All I know is people are going crazy and biting other people. And if you get bitten, you end up just like them, Brooks explained solemnly. Straight out of a horror movie, Barbara remarked softly. Unfortunately, it's real life, Brooks affirmed. Silence fell over the group as the sound of movement emanated from the road ahead. Heads turned as a couple of figures dashed by, pursued relentlessly by a horde of creatures. Brooks felt the tug of impulse, the urge to intervene, but caution held him back. Once the commotion passed, he signaled for the others to press forward. They reached the apex of the alley, peering out onto the street. The fleeing pair now lay prone on the pavement, besieged by zombies. Brooks looked back at the man for directions, who pointed in the direction of the feasting creatures. The officer let out a sigh, motioning for them to follow. Crossing the street opposite the ravenous horde, Brooks fixated on their movements. They advanced stealthily, hugging the shadows close, hoping the darkness would shroud their passage. Their progress was interrupted when one of the creatures spotted them, breaking away from its macabre meal to charge toward the group. Opting against gunfire, which risked drawing more attention, Brooks unfurled his retractable metal baton with practiced efficiency, With a forceful swing, he connected with the creature's skull as it drew near, sending it sprawling to the ground. Administering a couple more blows for good measure, he swiftly redirected his attention to the feasting zombies, who remained preoccupied with their grisly repast. Pressing on, they neared the apartment building across the street, halfway up the next block. Yet a new obstacle presented itself, a swarm of a dozen creatures clamoring outside, trying desperately to get inside. Officer Brooks broke the silence. "Is there another entrance?" The young man shook his head no. "Only if you live in the penthouse, which I don't." "If we're getting in, it's through that door," he explained. Brooks paused, contemplating their predicament. Time was not on their side. Prolonged exposure meant certain doom. Accepting the harsh reality, he turned to the group, passing his baton to Barbara. "Stay here and do not move until it's clear in front of the building. As soon as it is, you run like hell and get inside. Don't come back outside until somebody above my pay grade says it's safe," Brooks instructed firmly. Each member nodded in understanding, with Barbara briefly grasping his hand. "Thank you," she expressed sincerely. Brooks pivoted towards the street, his gaze fixed on the horde in front of the building. Methodically, he reloaded a fresh magazine into his firearm before darting down the street. Halting parallel to the zombies, he unleashed a barrage of gunfire, the staccato rhythm punctuating the air as half the magazine emptied in seconds. The cacophony of noise and bullet impacts instantly seized their attention. Swiftly pivoting, Brooks bolted in the opposite direction, his heart pounding with adrenaline as the remaining undead gave chase. Reaching the next block and making the turn, he stole a glance over his shoulder, catching a fleeting sight of the survivors racing towards the door. There was little time to revel in his fleeting triumph as the relentless zombies closed in. With no clear escape route in sight, his eyes fell upon a parked taxi by the roadside. With the undead mere yards behind him, he lunged for the vehicle, praying the back door would yield. His fingers gripped the handle, relief flooding over him as the door swung open. He hurled himself inside, slamming the door shut just as the zombies converged around the vehicle. The sound of their relentless pounding against the windows sent shivers down his spine, the grotesque figures pressing against every inch of glass. "Well, on the bright side, I never have to do cardio again," Brooks quipped, his tone laced with dark humor. Brooks wrestled with the decision of whether to call his wife, his mind clouded with the difficulty of conveying the grim reality. The thought of her anguish weighed heavily on him, yet the yearning to hear her voice persisted. Ultimately, he opted for a text message, his fingers tapping out a somber message on his phone. "The night shift is extra difficult tonight. I don't know when I'll be home again. Please stay inside until the news says it's okay to go out. I love you." With a heavy heart, he hit send, then powered off his phone, bracing himself against the agony of awaiting a reply he knew he couldn't bear. "So now, what are you going to do, man? Are you going to sit here and just wait to die? Or are you going to take the quick way out?" Brooks murmured to himself, glancing down at his gun. Lost in contemplation, a tantalizing aroma wafted through the air, stirring him from his thoughts. He sat up, casting his gaze to the front seat, where a brown, grease-soaked bag lay. With cautious curiosity, he retrieved it, revealing a cold but inviting burger and fries nestled within. A faint smile crept across his face as he surveyed his unexpected meal. "Well, what the hell? One last meal, then I can decide what to do," Brooks declared, resigning himself to savoring this final indulgence. As the taxi rocked under the weight of the encroaching creatures outside, he leaned back, relishing each bite, determined to enjoy every moment of his final meal. The end.